There was a time when a small black device with a tiny keyboard was the most powerful status symbol in the business world. Presidents carried it. Bankers refused to be without it. It was so central to daily life that people gave it a nickname, the CrackBerry, because putting it down felt almost impossible. And then, within the space of a few short years, it was gone. Not destroyed in a single moment, just quietly abandoned by almost everyone, all at once. This is the story of BlackBerry. Not quite a rise and fall in the usual sense. Something stranger. A company that built the future of communication, dominated it completely, and then watched, almost helplessly, as the world it created moved on without it. Let your eyes close if you'd like. You don't need to watch to listen. The story begins in Waterloo, Canada, in a company called Research in Motion, founded in the mid-1980s by a young engineering student named Mike Lazaridis. For years, the company worked on pagers and wireless data devices, quiet, unglamorous work, far from the spotlight of Silicon Valley. But Lazaridis had a specific obsession. He believed that email, real, true, push email arriving instantly in your pocket, would change how the world worked. In 1999, that obsession became a product, the BlackBerry 850, a small pager-like device with a black and white screen and a tiny thumb keyboard. It was not much to look at, but it did something no other device did well. It delivered your email to your hand the moment it arrived anywhere, without you having to ask for it. For business travelers, for executives, for anyone drowning in a growing tide of email, this felt like magic. Picture a boardroom in the early 2000s, a row of serious people in suits, and beneath the table, dozens of thumbs quietly clicking against small keyboards, checking messages during a meeting no one wanted to sit through. The BlackBerry had a particular hum, a distinctive click of its keys that became the background music of corporate life. Security teams loved it too. Its encrypted network made it, for years, the only smartphone approved for government and military use. By the mid-2000s, BlackBerry was not just a product. It was a habit, an addiction, a lifestyle. The company's messenger service, BBM, created its own private social world, red and green dots showing who was and wasn't available, long before anyone had heard of group chats on other platforms. At its peak, BlackBerry devices were carried by tens of millions of people, and the company's market value soared past $70 billion. It felt, to almost everyone inside and outside the company, unshakable. And then, in January 2007, on a stage in San Francisco, Steve Jobs held up a single rectangular slab of glass. The iPhone had no physical keyboard. Executives at BlackBerry, according to later accounts, were reportedly not alarmed. A touch-screen device with a virtual keyboard and no shortcut keys seemed to them impractical for serious business use. Typing an email on glass, they believed, would never satisfy people who depended on speed and precision. It was, in their eyes, a beautiful toy, not a threat. This is perhaps the quiet turning point of the whole story. Not a single mistake, but a series of reasonable-sounding judgments that, one by one, turned out to be wrong. The iPhone, and soon after Android devices, did not simply match what BlackBerry offered. They redefined what a phone was for. Where BlackBerry saw a messaging tool, Apple and Google were building a pocket computer. App stores opened a door to millions of possibilities, games, maps, cameras, social networks, entertainment that had nothing to do with corporate email at all. Consumers, not IT departments, began choosing their own phones. And increasingly, they were choosing to swipe glass instead of click keys. BlackBerry did not stand still. Engineers worked to catch up, releasing touchscreen models, experimenting with new designs, trying to hold on to the loyalty of its base. But each release seemed to answer yesterday's question rather than today's. While competitors moved fast and rebuilt their entire software from scratch around touch interfaces, BlackBerry, for years, tried to bolt new features onto an aging foundation, one built for keyboards and small monochrome menus, not sprawling color app ecosystems. Meanwhile, the culture that had once been BlackBerry's greatest strength, corporate discipline, tight security, careful engineering, began to feel, to a new generation of users, like caution mistaken for slowness. By 2011, we can see just how quickly the tide had shifted. The company's stock price, which had soared for a decade, began a steep decline. Layoffs followed. A botched network outage that year, leaving millions of users without email or messaging for days, further eroded confidence at exactly the moment the company could least afford it. In 2013, BlackBerry made one final major attempt, an entirely new operating system called BlackBerry 10, built from the ground up for touchscreens, alongside a flagship phone meant to prove the company could still compete. It arrived to respectful reviews and underwhelming sales. The market by then had already made up its mind. Consumers had built their digital lives, their apps, their habits, their social circles around other platforms, and switching back offered little reason to. That same year, the company wrote off nearly $1 billion in unsold inventory, and layoffs continued, cutting the workforce again and again over the following years. The CrackBerry, the device once so essential that people described physical symptoms of anxiety when separated from it, was, for most of the public, already a memory. By 2016, BlackBerry announced it would stop designing its own phones altogether, licensing its name instead to outside manufacturers. In 2022, the company finally ended support for its own classic operating system, meaning the very BlackBerry devices that had once defined mobile communication for a generation would, quite literally, stop functioning as phones at all. It is worth pausing here on what this collapse was and was not. This was not a story of technological failure. BlackBerry's engineers built genuinely excellent hardware, real keyboards that people still, to this day, describe with something close to nostalgic longing. Its security architecture was, for years, unmatched. The company did not run out of talent or ambition or even resources. What it seems to have lost, gradually, was the ability to imagine that the thing it had built so well might not be the thing the future actually wanted. Success, especially total, overwhelming success, has a way of making its own assumptions invisible. When you build the tool everyone depends on, it becomes difficult to imagine that dependence being replaced by something that, at first glance, looks like a downgrade. A glass screen with no buttons. A slower, clumsier way to type an email. Who would want that? Millions of people, it turned out. Not because typing improved, but because the entire idea of what a phone was for had quietly shifted underneath the question. Today, BlackBerry the company still exists, though almost unrecognizably. It has moved into cybersecurity software and enterprise systems. A quieter, more specialized life, far from the pockets of the world. Its physical phones exist now only as licensed products from other manufacturers, occasional nostalgic releases for a small, devoted community that still misses the click of a real keyboard. And the old devices themselves, the sleek black rectangles that once buzzed anxiously on boardroom tables, now sit in drawers, in museums, in the backs of closets, their batteries long dead, their once vital email accounts closed. Quiet. The way empty cities eventually turn quiet, the way any built thing does, once the reason for its urgency has passed. There is something almost calming in that fact, if you sit with it long enough. So much of what feels indispensable in any given moment is, in truth, just the current answer to a passing question. New questions arrive, new answers replace the old ones. And the object that once felt like it could never be put down, eventually, gently, without any single dramatic ending, simply is. If you are still here, still listening, let this be the last thought before sleep finds you. Somewhere in a drawer tonight, an old black device sits in the dark, its keyboard silent, no longer waiting for a message that will never come, and that is all right. It did its work. It is allowed to rest. Sleep well.